Hello and welcome to the DAOI Expert Series podcast. I'm Robert Coons, and with me today is Simon Thakur, who is actually an old friend of mine who I've met in person. We have real credibility going on here together. And Simon has done a lot of interesting work in the area of, we can say, Qigong, yoga, somatics, inner discovery, consciousness work, martial arts, and he's always really fascinated me for years. And as he continues to develop as a practitioner, and as a professional in the field, I think he's one of really the most um, daring and interesting people in our broader community right now. He's doing things with internal practice, which I think go sort of beyond the typical mold or conception that we might think of in like the Qigong or Taoism community, into some things which are very cutting edge and very avant-garde. Um, and so I had been desperate to have him on the podcast because I love to talk to people who are doing new and fascinating and well-informed and useful things, which I think all of these are things that we could say about Simon. But I should probably let him explain himself. Hello, Simon.
Hi, Robert. Thanks for having me.
I am delighted to have you. You know, we've known each other for quite a number of years, and we originally met through a message board, which is one of the scarier places on the internet, called Empty Flower. And, but then we met in person in Canada in like 2007 or something like that, right? It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so where do you live in the world?
I now live I've been back in Australia for the last maybe 14, 15 years since I came back from Taiwan around 2009, I guess. So 16 years. Well, now I live on the easternmost point of Australia, just about 20 minutes north of Byron Bay, the top edge of New South Wales. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. And you mentioned that you had lived in Asia, but East Asia, but I think also in South Asia as well, right?
Yeah, I've spent so my dad's Indian, so we visited India multiple times as when I was young, and then I spent an exchange year in Thailand when I was 17, and then moved to Japan when I was 20 for a few years. My parents lived in Japan, so I was in and out of Tokyo every year for 10 years, and then spent a year in Shanghai, 2 years in Taipei, and multiple trips to India and Thailand and stuff along the way. So yeah, I've spent probably about 10 years total living in Asia.
And you have done quite a bit of study of various inner practices well in Asia. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that experience?
Sure. Yeah, so um, my dad's Indian from North India. He's never done a day of yoga. He's not like wouldn't consider himself spiritual at all, but just, you know, so I grew up with like Hanuman and, you know, uh Shiva and Vishnu and stuff sort of in my field. And early on, I was exposed to the idea of yoga even as a kid. And so I was always kind of into it. Like me and my little friends, we were doing judo when I was little, and I was into yoga and also Lord of the Rings, and they all kind of merged together into this kind of magical worldview. But then, so yeah, when I moved to Thailand when I was 17, I did this exchange year, a homestay, and I started studying Buddhism. Like, I mean, I guess formally, like I was studying with like um, the Buddhist. There was a teacher of Buddhism at the school that I was at, and then I spent the last month of my year there in a monastery. Became ordained as a 18-year-old novice monk in the southern Thai. Um, I don't know what the tradition's actually called. There's the Thai forest tradition, which is in northern Thailand, but then in southern Thailand, there's a whole meditation tradition started by this guy called Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. And so that was the tradition that I started like properly practicing in. And that kind of set me off like genuine meditation practice. And then, yeah, in India, studying yoga with the best teachers that I could find. Um, Living in Japan, I was studying Chinese martial arts. So I started Chinese martial arts when I returned from Thailand, when I moved back to Canberra. And my teacher in Canberra, had some Tai Chi teachers, and then their teacher was this little Chinese medicine internal martial arts guy called Chang Fei Wang or Fei. So started training with him, and that's when I decided, oh, I want to go to China. I want to do Chinese medicine. But instead, I moved to Japan, studying internal martial arts, studying Daitoryu, Aiki Jiu Jitsu with a crew of Japanese teachers who, we trained in a Shinto shrine. Friday evenings, they were all Shinto practitioners, and that was really interesting to get exposed to Shinto as a tradition of practice, like an esoteric yoga. I was just doing the jujitsu, but had their little esoteric yoga thing going on. And then I came back to Australia, did a few years of Chinese medicine study, went over to Shanghai, training internal martial arts and standing meditation with a couple of different teachers there. Moved to Taiwan, studying Xingyi and Bagua with Luo Dexiu. Yeah, that's probably sort of the basic kind of, so movement, meditation, medical health, and spiritual traditions all kind of jumbled up together in all that time in Asia. That was what I was doing. I was a pretty, I think after my experience of being a monk as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, I was like always in that decade through my 20s, I was like, am I going to live in the world, or am I going to abandon everything and become an actual recluse? So I was kind of walking that edge for a lot of that time and didn't become a recluse. Uh, yeah.
Yes, well, the old saying is the great hermit lives in the town and the lesser hermit lives in the forest.
Mm,
Um, but also though you're a real diamond of a person, and what I mean is that you're multi-sided or multifaceted, and so you also have a lot of very interesting experience, I think, in very fascinating approaches. I would say, I was going to say fitness, but very fascinating approaches to modern exercise modalities, and also even some elements of dance and stuff like that. You're the person who turned me on to this Japanese Butoh approach to dancing, and so those areas I'm really interested to hear about them,
mm.
especially the exercise stuff, because I think we have some interests in common there, and I would love to hear your experience, because I think you've met more of the more cutting edge exercise people than I have. So
Mm. Yeah, so okay, so like I had a weird upbringing, like where like a pretty sort of solid academic. Both my parents were academics, both my parents were strongly atheist, even though dad was coming from a massively Hindu background and my mum was coming from a massive like Irish Catholic background. Both of them sort of rejected their spiritual traditions, and we were raised very atheist. But I, from a very early age, had this tendency to like go off into like massive trance-like imagination states and whatever, but also very academic and lots of science, lots of biology, physics, maths, chemistry. And so I did a couple of years of university studying before I went into the Chinese medicine stuff, doing like, again, physics, maths, biology, human biology, evolutionary biology, anthropology, archaeology, etc. And then I was like, forget this. I actually want to do Chinese medicine. And then I went off to Asia and, spent a long time doing that stuff in Japan and whatnot. Came back to Australia, started doing my Chinese medicine training. Um, and then and
uh,
then I went I actually and then when I came back from Asia, um after one of these trips, I decided that I wanted to go to massage school. I'd already done a diploma in like Tui Na and Shiatsu, and I'd spent a year doing an internship in the hospital in Shanghai. And so I had this sort of basis in like human physiology and anatomy, as well as like the Chinese medical foundations, as they do. I'm not sure how it is in Canada, but here in Australia, if you study Chinese medicine, you have to do majors in like human biology, anatomy, physiology, et cetera, et cetera. But then I came back and I was like, look, I want to do another round of anatomy and physiology and body work, but within a Western context. Um, so that I really just wanted to get really fluent in anatomy and physiology, like from an academic scientific perspective, but also from a hands-on bodywork perspective, to try and understand what I was doing with my like meditation, with the internal martial arts, with all this like deep spinal work that we do, and learning to train the breath and the mind body breath link and all of this sort of stuff. So I was like, okay, cool. And so I did my massage and remedial massage and soft tissue therapy and like physical therapy. I ended up getting like most of a physical therapy degree, like advanced diplomas and stuff, and then switched my degree and got a medical science degree. So studying neuroscience, studying molecular biology, studying genetics, studying immunology, protein biochemistry, like really getting into the nitty gritty of human biology. Um, and the studying the neuroscience really like triggered something for me where I was like, I've done all this stuff, I've done all this stuff, and then I was like, oh, the brain, studying the brain, and like that classic book came out, the brain that changes itself, and I was like, ah, neuroplasticity. This is really interesting. Meditation, neuroplasticity, body awareness, neuroplasticity. And I started reading all the books that I could on neuroplasticity, and especially anything to do with neuroplasticity and body awareness, neuroplasticity and mind-body interactions. Like there's this whole field called psychoneuroimmunology. They don't tend to use the term anymore, but 20 years ago, this was a big thing where they were going, the mind affects the brain, affects the immune system, affects every body system. Um, so went on a huge, big, deep dive into that, and that got me into Feldenkrais. Feldenkrais method. I'm not sure if you've explored Feldenkrais method, Robert, but
Yeah, yeah, you know what? I have to
amazing.
just mention that it might have been you or it might have been somebody else on Empty
Mm,
Flower who suggested to try Feldenkrais method, and I went to a couple of programs in Toronto,
mm,
and it was amazing because it totally corrected my back, and I was standing the straightest I think that I'd ever stood in my
nice.
life.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So during this period, anyway, that was a roundabout way of saying that, okay, I've been doing all this Asian stuff and like all this like quite, woo-woo out there kind of stuff. And then I came back to Australia and I went through this period of going, look, I want to understand what I'm doing. I want to try and bridge these worldviews, and understand physiologically and have a understanding of the basics of how the brain works, and then and at the same time also I wanted to mainstream not just the sort of esoteric mind body knowledge that I was getting, but I also wanted to mainstream my physical training and martial arts like knowledge. And so I was like starting to train with the barbell, starting to train with kettlebells, taking up wrestling, because I'd be doing all this Taiji and Bagua and Shingi, and we did lots of push hands. And I was like, well, what happens if I do wrestling? Like just with wrestlers who don't care about this stuff. They might go, oh, cool, you do some Chinese stuff. Probably bullshit, but like, let's have a wrestle. And discovering like that a lot of the skills that we were working in Taiji and Shingi and Bagua were actually really applicable to wrestling and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And I had a long Capoeira background, hadn't mentioned that, Capoeira Angola particularly. And the Capoeira Angola is this older, more African influenced style of Capoeira, very low to the ground, a lot of hands on the ground, not so much big flashy spinning kicks, but more like low to the ground kind of monkey stuff. And the mythology of it is it's like the Africans forced into slavery in Brazil, preserving some of their African martial and dance and ancestor worship arts, but then in the body language of capoeira, it comes into like people not so much being like big shirts off, chest, like look how good I am, but more like people hiding in the long grass, hiding in the jungle. The body movements are much more like monkey-like and very sort of sneaky and hiding. And this then, the monkey movement, the rolling and tumbling that we do in the Jiu Jitsu and Aikido kind of stuff, and then the spinal waves of the internal martial arts and the pranayama and so on from the yoga traditions. This stuff then led me into like taking up like, okay, wrestling, parkour, like Feldenkrais, Pilates. I did an extensive amount of Pilates training and discovering, and then coming out the other end with this idea of when I started teaching with friends of just being like, let's just call it natural movement. And then we can do whatever the hell we want. You know, we'll experiment, we'll play with the ideas of how would a human move, or how do we move as humans when we're sneaking around in the forest or just running slowly over rocky riverbeds and things like, and starting to like discover these ideas of like, because many of these traditional methods have these ideas of alignment, correct alignment, proper alignment, or whatever. But then if you're running around in nature, you discover, oh, the body is like actually really, really, really soft. And we have all of these joints, all of these mobile joints, which all need to be soft and all adaptable and all sort of clever. And so this idea of waking up the intelligence of all the little parts of the body and the natural movement, the natural body being a part where every joint, every part is sensitive and able to soften, able to stabilize, able to like be alive and clever. And so that's where it sort of starts to link with the internal martial arts of like every part supporting, you know. So this was then this time period, again, sort of blah, 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 rambling along. But this time period was also the birth of the movement culture. The movement culture, like Ido Portal came out to Australia. I met him on his first trip. He came camping with us on doing a like little survival trip, eating bush tucker and things. And we discovered all of these other people around the world. MoveNat started coming along, Rafe Kelly, all these different people started coming along, being like, hey, let's do traditional movement practices, strength training, gymnastics training, whatever it is. But then let's also open our minds and like allow ourselves to play with all of these different realms. So I was definitely very guilty of that, digging lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of shallow holes. And then gradually those shallow holes all sort of turned into this kind of pit, this big pit, wide, maybe not as deep as some, but it's quite wide. Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting because one of the things that fascinates me, so in a completely different part of my life, I like lifting. And one of the things about people who lift a lot,
Mm.
especially competitive people, if they don't know how to move their sides, then if you touch their shoulder, they fall over.
Uh-huh.
And so I love the new approach to movement. And this was one of the reasons why I was so interested to have a chat with you. We had a chat before this interview, but then now we're having a more formal chat. And you devised these ideas into a sort of, I don't know if it's systematic because I don't know enough about it, but you devised these things into a pretty compelling practice idea, and you've made an introduction about it. But um, I think one of the things that is an interesting question. You're teaching this sort of your approach, and I think at the same time also teaching qigong. Is that right?
Mm.
And so it's sort
Yeah.
of bridging both worlds. But is it that one comes out of the other, or do they influence each other, or how are you viewing this?
Yeah. So somewhere along the line, around about the time when I was, that period that I was just talking, I think I was sort of finishing off like one of my advanced diplomas in myotherapy and like, doing dry needling and exercise rehabilitation and working as a clinician. And also like, all of that stuff, all of the formal study and clinical work was kind of like my cover. That was my cover. It was like, yeah, yeah, I can tell people I'm doing this, but what I'm really doing is like trying to get my head around. like this mind body nature sort of realm, and doing my meditation practice and studying how is the neuroscience helpful as a exercise rehab and bodywork practitioner, but how's the neuroscience helpful as a meditation qigong like breathwork practitioner as well. And then as a rehab practitioner and a movement practitioner, like with my background in evolutionary biology, I was always just like, how can we be studying anatomy without studying the evolution of the anatomy? What are we doing studying how arms work without studying the evolution of arms? How can we be studying the spine without studying the evolution of spines? And when we study the spine, they're telling us that like the multifidus and the rotatories in this deepest layer of spinal muscles, they're saying they're stabilizing muscles that resist movement. And it's like, what are you talking about, guys? Like, spines evolved to move, not to resist movement. And our spines are the same. Like, yes, they have stabilizing functions, but also they can move. They can move because of where we come from. And look at how all the other animals move. And how come we're looking at humans as separate from the way all the other animals move? Like, why don't we look for what's similar instead of, all this sort of stuff? And so I was like riffing on these ideas in my own practice. And then in rehab, it's like, okay, you want to rehab a knee. Well, okay, knee extensions, great, good. But like, why not like look at what is your knee going to encounter in the real world outside the city? You know what I mean? Like, go for a walk on a rocky riverbed that's a little bit slippery and look at what all your joints need to do. You know what I mean? There's no correct alignment. You know what I mean? There's no neutral spine. It's like every joint has to be able to do this so that the head stays over the base of support. So this evolutionary approach to movement, to rehab, and then also to mind body practice. And so I started, and then eventually I came out of the closet and I started calling what I was doing like ancestral movement. I was like, how about we look at human movement and mind body practice within this context of where we come from? And so it is systematic in that we systematically explore every region of the body, all the joints of the body, and how they move, all of the possibilities they have for movement, and how all of those movement possibilities help us do things like balance, get up and down off the ground, how they help us like move through different kinds of terrains, like sort of parkour-y type stuff, and so on. And then in the realm of but then there's also the awareness practice. So developing like basic neuroplasticity, body awareness can be improved through practice, through systematic practice. And so doing systematic practice to improve body awareness, and then doing systematic practice to improve the ability to move any different part of the body through three-dimensional space sensitively and spontaneously in response to different things and in response to partners and so on. And then noticing that as we move the awareness through the body responds. The body responds. You pay attention to your breath, the breath changes. You pay attention to the breath in each little part of the body where the breath moves, like the center of the skull all the way down to the base of the pelvic floor. And all of those parts of the body change in response to the way we're paying attention. So it's this thing of like, it links our movement in space, our movement through different terrain, our ability to sense our bodies, our ability to sense other bodies when we're moving with other bodies, and then the deep internal awareness of like sending our attention through the depths of the body, calming to learn to sink the awareness inside, becoming more and more and more and more still, slowing down the breath more and more and more and more, so we become sensitive to finer and finer changes in the body, and then opening up the deep insides of the body to conscious awareness. So it's this kind of, it's like, yes, I've got systems of practice within this, which are very much drawn from like many different traditions. And then it's more like an angle of like how we look at these things. So yes, I do also teach Qigong. because like ancestral movement isn't like, it's like, oh, people come to the animal body class and they say, oh, now we're doing ancestral movement. And then they come to the Qigong class and they go, oh, now we're doing Qigong. And no, it's like, no, the whole point is with my sort of thing of ancestral movement is that all of our movement, everything we do is because of our ancestry. Our spines are the way they are because we come from a lineage stretching back hundreds of millions of years of spines, swimming through the ocean, galloping around on the land, swinging through the trees, and so on. So the ancestral movement is very, very, very much, all of the understandings were massively informed by Taoist practice, by Indian yogic practice, by Buddhist meditation practice, but they're sort of, so it's like this idea of like, I like to celebrate the way these things emerge in different traditions. The animal body expressed in the Chinese martial arts, the spinal waves expressed in Haitian dance, or the Maasai jumping practices, or all these different dance traditions around the world, and just like but then when I teach, even when I'm teaching Qigong, we do use some Chinese terminology because I love the Chinese tradition. Like, but the way I approach it is like, rather than just working with the points and the meridians and so on as they're taught in the traditions that I've learned, I teach within a context of like, let's just work directly with the body. Let's just work like, what are the points along the central axis? Well, why not just study the entire central axis? The front, the back, the left, the right, the inside. Like, go 1 inch towards the back with your awareness, come 2 inches towards the front with your awareness, get to know each and every little bit. And that's kind of the this idea of like just looking at nature directly itself rather than putting stuff on top. Anyway, that's a big ramble, but that's sort of some of how these two worlds are intersecting in my practice.
Well, now I'm very, very excited because now I can start asking you real questions. So thank you very much for introducing this to me, because it's going to make a good foundation for the rest of what I think is going to be a fascinating conversation. So now this question has come to me because you're mentioning the spine, and also this is, of course, the spines have been with living things for a very long time. But I think in Chinese practice, or maybe some other places too, but they have these ideas like qi. And this is such a difficult topic because there's so many different potential meanings of even just this one concept. But what I'd like to ask you is, more specifically, when we have a sensation of qi moving in the body, let's say along one of these channels, like the meridian that runs up the spine. I won't name it because I think also other cultures have this as well. Have you found any satisfying answers for why we might get these kind of sensations when we, practice meditation or move in certain ways?
There's layers to it. For me, there's layers to it. So firstly, I don't have any trouble with the concept of qi anymore at all. In my personal use of terminology, I take the word qi to simply mean transformation, transformations. And so, this thing of like qi being the breathing of heaven and earth. So the sky and the earth, dense elements up above are condensing, and like the carbon from the sky, carbon dioxide from the sky being breathed in, turned into wood, turned into plant matter, being consumed by animals, turned into all the carbon in our bodies coming from the sky, but also all of us decomposing into the ground and then being buried under the oceans and condensing into rock. Lots of the carbon trapped in rock came from the sky. And then that rock's also being pulled up and digested. and in animal bodies, and then breathe out and turn back into the sky. So the sky and the earth, this classic thing of like heaven and earth not being two separate things, but being one process, heaven, earth, heaven, earth. The breathing of heaven and earth is chi. So all life, everything moving chi, everything we feel, everything we see, et cetera, et cetera. No problem, no problem. I don't think that's like, it's fucking incredible. It's like this whole thing of like, it's not esoteric, it's not woo-woo. It's like, man, like science, the worldview of evolutionary biology and physics and maths and chemistry is like this wild esoteric doctrine, right? Like the Big Bang. Are you kidding me? Like this is like some woo-woo out there stuff. But it's like, okay, cool. It's like for me, there's no issue in reconciling the concept of chi with the concept of biology anymore. And so then when it comes to qigong in the body, like feeling chi, it's just this simple thing of like gradually like tuning into smaller and smaller increments of change. Like if your body's very tense, then the body feels like a bunch of big blocks, like shoulder and like your butt or like your thigh or like your face or whatever. And then you soften a bit, and those big blocks of tension, boom, they soften into blocks like a tenth the size. And then you soften those, and gradually feelings of solidity in the body reduce. And you start to feel more like the breath stops being inhalation, exhalation, and the breath becomes a wave of small changes. And then the feelings of solid muscles soften into feelings of like the body being made of liquid. And you can start to feel, and initially you're in your muscle body, and then when you soften your muscle body enough, you notice your heartbeat. There all the time, pumping, 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 and it's huge. It's not small. It's massive. And you go, okay, my heart's massive, and I'm not doing hard exercise. I'm sitting perfectly still. I'm standing perfectly still, and boom, my heart, a muscle like the size of my two fists going boosh, 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 boosh. And then you start to feel, oh, okay, I can feel the pulse in my armpits. I can feel the pulse in my groin. I can feel the pulse in my belly. Oh, I can feel the pulse in my fingers. Oh, I can feel the pulse in my toes. Oh, I can feel the pulse in the whole body. And then multiple pulses. Like it's not just one pulse, it's going like rippling around the body. So you can start to feel finer and finer and finer and finer sensation. And then if you're working on slowing the breath as well, gradually the breath becoming more and more and more and more and more calm. And then maybe it's taking 10 seconds to complete an inhalation, 10, 15, 20 seconds to complete an exhalation, or maybe the breath's becoming so soft that again, you're coming out of the realm of big change, and then small, 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 little steps of change into like these smooth waves of very, very tiny changes happening in a stream. And this is like, from my perspective, my angle on it is this is going into finer and finer realms of chi sensation, feeling finer and finer transformations in the body. And then what we start to notice is that once the deeper in we get, the more we find these tiny changes in the body responding in real time to our attention, responding in real time to the quality of our attention. Like if you calm down enough that you're feeling like the whole body pulsing, the body's so soft in this bag of liquid and everything's pulsing and the breath's moving really, 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 really slow. If you think a fully formed thought, you go, oh, I wonder what time it is. And you feel a huge response in the body. It's like, oh my God, a fully formed sentence. And the body goes, and there's this riot of change inside the body. Because of course there is. It's like adrenaline, like the basic parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system, stress response, relaxation response, completely different cocktails of hormones, adrenaline, and so on, like surging through the body. And like your body releases adrenaline, all your hairs stand on end. Your body releases adrenaline, your blood pressure increases, right? Straight away, you know what I mean? And so of course you feel it. Of course you feel more heat and you feel a surge inside your body because adrenaline just got released and your blood pressure just increased. The strength and speed of the contractions of the heart just increased. Like the entire central axis of the body just had a bomb go off because you had a thought, in the realm of so I don't talk about chi so much in my classes. I talk about the teeny tinies. I talk about becoming sensitive enough that the body dissolves into this world of teeny tinies. And the teeny tinies respond in real time to every little shift in the mind. So that's that idea. But then, and this is where it's like, okay, I'm really interested in this question, is because when we start to enter the realms of like the edges of absorption, like let's say you're dropping your awareness into a single point, maybe in the lower abdomen, maybe between the eyebrows, wherever it might be. But again, we're becoming calm enough that the attention and awareness are not jumping around so much anymore, and they start to like land on that point of attention much more frequently, and it's becoming relaxing and very pleasant. And then you get that little stream of the attention landing on the point like a stream, and then we get these rushes of sensation, like all the pores opening and the body getting this warm, like this sort of sweating, or all the hairs standing on end, these surges up the body, up the spine and stuff. And I have no idea why this is happening. I find this really interesting. It's like, what the hell is that? Like, what's going on here? No idea at all. Um, and why it should happen, I have no idea. Like, this is really interesting stuff, and I don't even know how we could possibly answer this. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, I always say to people, the problem is that we don't we don't even know what we should be researching to understand
Mm,
this, let
mm.
alone finding, organizations that would be willing to help us research it. So this is a hard to understand topic, but
Well,
it's quite nice though.
there's people doing. I haven't been following. I got two kids now. I don't have as much time to read as I had a while ago. So I'm not like staying up to date with the literature at all at the moment. But even 10, 15 years ago, there was a lot of really cool neuroscience study going on with Tibetan meditators, where people like Richard Davidson and the Mind and Life Institute, and they're working with the Dalai Lama, and they're these neuroscientists in this growing field of contemplative studies and contemplative neuroscience, where they're going, hey, look, in the Tibetan tradition, we have access to many individuals who have done 30, 40,000 hours of logged meditation practice of specific practices. And like it's known, like it's known what they've done because they've been told, and it's a tradition. It's like you have to do this, and this is what you're doing for your retreat and stuff. And so they're like, okay, well, can we check out their brains? And it's like then they're doing fMRI, and it's like, well, let's see what happens in the brain when they switch to compassion. Let's see what happens in the brain when they switch to absorption, and so on. Really, really cool. I still don't know if they've done that with, because I'm like, what's going on when they're doing the central axis meditation? What's
Mm.
going on when they're doing the tumor and they're like learning to send direct the attention into the center of the belly and like radiate heat through the central axis? Because I was like, I want to know what's going on here, and I still haven't seen that. But it's like there is, from a neuroscience perspective, there's really cool, really interesting studies that could be done there. What it means is like, oh, this part of the brain lights up when they do this part of the brain lights up when they do that. Who even knows what that means, like, or how useful that is? But
I
yeah.
saw a really cool study a few months ago that was looking into people's experiences of light during
Mm,
meditation.
mm,
And so it's so cool. I mean, I feel like always from the perspective of doing Taoist stuff, it, for those of us who do that, we're such a small group. But I should have also thought of the Tibetans because, of course, this is wonderful, wonderful
mm,
work. Now, um, I want to be mindful here of the time. Do you still have like 20 minutes?
Yeah, man, I've got this is my morning off, so I got
Oh,
time.
okay,
We can,
great. Yeah,
yeah.
that's good. So then I want to sort of keep going in the same vein, and but you can tell me whether or not this is relevant to what you're doing. But um somebody put me on to the idea at a certain point
Mm,
that some of these sensation related things may be mediated by, well, I mean, doubtless mediated by the various parts of the nervous system, and also possibly, neurochemicals and stuff like that.
hmm hmm
And I know that this is something you've put me onto a few really cool books.
mm,
And so I know this is something that you're looking into. And I would love to hear about this central axis stuff relative, and just for the people who are doing Taoist practice or Qigong on here, so like we're using some pretty broad terminology, but generally speaking, this is within the realm of those orbit practices and
mm,
different meridians opening up and stuff like that. But it also goes beyond that, so that's why we're
mm.
using more general terms. But yeah, I'd love to hear about your take on like um, the nervous system and sort of different things that are firing in somatic experiences that you either know about or that you're willing to speculate about.
Um, Look, so from a general kind of perspective, um, is the whole body, like the main nerve trunks of the central nervous system, from the brain down through the spinal cord, um, and then the autonomic nerves going from the sort of front, like front inside, under the, like in front of the spinal cord, basically running down the inside of the body on the front surface of the spine, um, feeding the organs, and then obviously the spinal nerve roots emerging from between each of the vertebrae, like in every spinal segment. So you got the central channel, and then you got the nerve roots, and then you got the nerves spreading from the center to the periphery, and the whole nervous system. So nerve trunks, and then nerve roots, and then ending finally in nerve capillaries in the skin and in all the tissues of the body, including the organs. But then all of them, all of the nerves, the whole nerve system, they're actually neurovascular bundles. So the nerves aren't separate from they're all woven through with arteries and veins, so, and the arteries and veins are also wrapped in nerve endings. And the nerves also have arterial and venous capillaries in them. So it's like nerves wrapping blood vessels wrapping nerves, blood vessels and nerves interpenetrating each other, going out to and from all the body tissues. And then every little part, or they're all responding to each other. They're all responding to each other, and the central axis being the sort of the center of all of this. So in the way that I work, when we're doing these body practices, let's say we're working with the spine, with this idea of like opening the whole body to conscious awareness. And not just opening the whole body to conscious awareness, but getting actual physical movement, contraction and relaxation of muscles, opening and closing of joints. And we want to work the whole spine, and we want to get opening and closing of every single joint. Seven vertebrae in the neck, 12 vertebrae in the thoracic spine with ribs coming off them, 5 vertebrae in the lumbar spine, and then your sacrum and your coccyx. And each one of these little joints has flexion extension, has lateral flexion, has rotation. And so in the way that I practice, we actually do specific movements to try and get clear flexion extension, lateral flexion, and rotation at each vertebra, particularly flexion and extension. Um, at each vertebral segment, and we do it with partner exercises where you're helping each other feel, is it there, is it there, is it there, no, 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 this segment, this segment, this segment, yes, that's this segment, opening and closing, in flexion and extension. And then you go up, and is this segment, this segment, this segment, and gradually open up the whole spine so that we have distinct awareness of the opening and closing of those joints and distinct voluntary control of the deep segmental muscles that run between every single segment of the spine. With this idea that if we don't have clear movement there, how can we expect to have clear meditation there? You know what I mean? We can feel what we can feel, but then we can't feel what we can't feel. And so if we're just doing a meditation practice, washing our awareness through the spine, we'll just be feeling the bits we can feel, and we'll be habitually skipping over the bits that we can't feel. And so then if we have a movement practice with a partner to try and help us get, this is distinct, this is this segment, is it moving or not? No, it's not. No, it's not. Yes, now it's moving. Bam, that segment there. And we wake up the whole spine with these movement practices like this. Then we can do another layer where we learn to use the pressurizing action of the breath. And we learn to send you can breathe into the lower abdomen. You can breathe into the middle abdomen. You can breathe into the upper abdomen. You can breathe into the lower rib cage. You can breathe into the middle rib cage. You can breathe into the upper rib cage on the front of the body. But that means you can also breathe into like the lower abdomen, the middle lower abdomen, the upper lower abdomen, the lower upper abdomen, the middle upper abdomen, the upper abdomen. Like you can breathe into the lowest 3 ribs, the next lowest 3 ribs, the next lowest 3 ribs, the upper 3 ribs. You've got 12 ribs. Eventually, you can start to breathe into 1 rib at a time. You can breathe in, and then you can direct the breath into the back, and you can breathe into the lower back. You can breathe into the middle back, the lower parts of the back of the rib cage. You can breathe into the upper back, the upper parts of the back of the rib cage. But then with distinct practice and help from a partner, you can learn to breathe into the L5 lumbar vertebra or L4, L5. You can breathe into the L3, L4 lumbar segment, L2, L3. You can breathe into each distinct segment of the back. You know what I mean? So you can learn to, and then not just direct the movement of the breath there, but then you can work with the quality of the breath there so that it's not these big, sharp, sudden things, but you can use the slow, smooth, you can slow it down, you can smooth it out, you can use the breath to be releasing tension from that specific segment and making it feel warm, making it feel really nice, making it feel really cozy. And this takes you into the realm of like not just moving your awareness through the central axis of the body with more and more and more clarity on the back of the spine, on the front of the spine, between the front and the back, but you can be using the breath and using the mind to then be like adjusting what you're feeling in all these places to make them feel really calm, really cozy, really pleasant, really smooth, the breath getting soft so that we get into the realm of tiny sensations and we can fill the central axis with like these wonderful senses of like feeling completely safe, feeling completely at ease, not needing to go out of the body, craving all this stuff and just coming into the deep center. And in that realm of subtle sensation, this deep center then responding to the awareness and all this really interesting stuff starts to go down where the external world can be made to disappear, or you feel, because this is what I find really interesting is rather than making the external world disappear, you start to notice, each little bit, each little tiny bit is responding not just to my mind, but is responding to the whole world. Each little bit of the body is linked with the senses, is responding to the whole sense of the outside world as well. And so then the whole central axis of the body becomes this like this pillar of like sensitive responding to the living world outside. It's like it's responding primarily to our own mind, but then as we learn to go in there and like release, like make the mind more and more and more and more and more calm, then the mind can start to get out of the way. And then we just feel the deep center of the body just listening, responding to the world. And it's like basic body practice, just gradually, and just relaxation, honestly, relaxation. We almost need a better word for it because it's like just learning to release, 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 gradually leads to in the depths of the body gradually leads to all these like wild poetic experiences that we read about in the classical literature of all these spiritual traditions, you know, like the self disappearing, merging with the world of things dissolving into the world of unmanifest things with no names. And as soon as names appear, then, you know, edges appear and whatever, all this sort of stuff. Yeah. But it all just, so it's like learning to systematically do this in the central axis of the body is like where we find all these deep chronic holding patterns. And as they release, then all this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful stuff just starts to naturally happen by itself, whatever terminology you choose to use.
Yes, well, this is so, I mean, this is so cool. I'm like a kid in a candy store. That's a weird metaphor though. Anyway, so but I don't dare mention the author of this book because he's controversial, but I was reading a book recently, and the author said one of the problems with formal meditation traditions, and a lot of it he was talking about was related to Zen, is that people tend to, in these traditions, they tend to shut off the connection with the body in order to chase after a kind of enlightened consciousness.
Mm,
And I think looking at it from the, Taoist quote unquote perspective, it's not as bad there, but it's still pretty bad because
mm,
there's such a there's such a clear um, teleology to those practices where they have this conception that a certain thing has to happen with the energy and a certain thing has to happen with consciousness. And when you're there, and that's really great, but imagine how much stuff people are missing. And
mm,
I think what you're doing really strikes me as excellent in that it's going into those places where the traditional sort of telos endgame enlightenment approach doesn't touch because they're afraid of wasting their time. But what you're doing is it's so potent. I was just doing some of the stuff in my ribs and my vertebrae while you were talking about it,
mm.
and it's so potent because it can release a lot of tension that I think people, they don't know how much tension they carry in their
Absolutely.
bodies,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
especially around the back.
Mm,
And then the first thing they'll go to is whatever parts sore, like their shoulders,
mm,
or if they're a little bit more in touch, they'll go to the sort of like the muscles on the side of their
mm,
next to their spine and so on. But
mm,
the stuff you're talking about is kind of mind blowing, and it's something I wish we would see more. But it's good that you're here.
mm,
But I do think that we should start to draw it in a bit. But I want to ask you just very concretely to so you mentioned the name of your system, Ancestral Movement. Is that right? Did I get it right?
mm.
And
Yeah.
then, but you are actually a person that can be really reached out to and really actually talked to and met in more than one format, right? Because you have live classes in Australia, but I think you're also doing some online stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, I finally reopened the online. I was doing online practice during COVID, but I mostly, honestly, I prefer working with people like in nature. Honestly, I teach mostly outdoors, and we run camps in the. We're lucky in Australia to have the beautiful forests, and so we do stuff in nature. But yeah, I've started online practice just about a month ago. Live classes, but also people can access the recordings if they join the thing. And that's in my take on these Chinese practices. Like we're using the sort of basic framework of the Hunyuan Qigong from Feng Zhiqiang as the framework for layering in all of these aspects of mind body practice and opening the central axis and opening the deep spaces of the body to our awareness, and then from the deep spaces of the body, opening our awareness to the world, which I'm very excited about. Honestly, I love these practices, and it's like we can say, oh, I'm doing all this new and interesting stuff, but like the more I do this stuff, the more I find it in the traditions as well, you know, like it's not new at all. And that's also part of why I started calling it ancestral, was I was like, oh, all of these practices, they're coming, like it is the creative genius of the human mind, but it's just coming out of the body, like nature emerging through the human body and through the human consciousness. So it's all right here. We just need to like pay slightly closer and slightly more like curious and reverent and maybe even playful attention, you know? So yes, I'm doing some online stuff now too. You can join me.
That's the one though. The playful part, I think, is a big part of the ticket.
Yeah, if we're lucky enough to still have our sense of humor intact, and we're not too riddled with like pain and suffering, which sometimes we are, you know, but like in those moments when we can still have a chuckle, um, it could be nice to include that in our practice. Yeah.
That's great. So how do people find you then?
Yeah, Ancestral Movement is me, uh, and also my name, Simon Thakur, Thakur. That's also me. I am on I have my website, ancestralmovement.com, um, up and running again after like 14, 15 years of increasing accumulation of bugs on my WordPress site. Now it's back again. Facebook, Instagram, all the usual places. Yeah. Yeah, I like it when people contact me with like, you know, nerdy questions about stuff. And yeah, I've got some really good connections around the world. Yeah.
Totally cool. I think that I really hope that, you know, to break the fourth wall here, I really hope that for those of you who are watching this, that you'll check out what Simon is doing. We before this we had a preamble chat, and I was just floored. You know, it was so cool.
Mm.
And because you know, like if you come to this stuff from a really formal approach, sometimes you forget the, as you say, what do you call them? The teeny tinies?
The teeny tinies, yeah. Yeah.
And it's just so liberating to have this other view, which is true. It's really in keeping. That's I think why I like it so much. It's really in keeping with traditional practice. And
Mm.
then at the same time, it's incredibly avant-garde because it invites us to notice and be present for more experiences. So it's been really exceptionally delightful having this chat with you.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah,
Yeah, so
man.
I'm going to stop the recording, but
All right.
stick around for a minute, okay?
Yeah, man. Thank
All
you.
right, everybody, you heard it here first. Well, I don't know, maybe you didn't hear it here first, but you heard it here, and you know where to find Simon and Ancestral Movement. So go to it. I'm really excited about this. So anyway, see you next time.